Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unraveling a massive global mystery that is literally hiding right inside your wallet. The US dollar is, without a doubt, the most powerful currency on the planet right now. It fuels global trade, it's locked up in the vaults of central banks everywhere, and it's trusted across continents. But, the world didn't always run on the greenback. The dollar's rise to absolute global dominance, it wasn't just some lucky accident. It's actually this incredibly fascinating, dramatic story involving war, gold, black gold, and just immense economic power.
Okay, let's dive into this. The big question we really want to answer today is exactly how the US dollar became the world's undisputed heavyweight financial champion. And, honestly, perhaps even more importantly, why it still holds that incredibly powerful position today despite, well, a rapidly changing world. So to truly understand how the global economy works right now, we kind of have to trace this chronological saga all the way back to its roots.
But right before we rewind the clock, I want you to look at this staggering statistic, 58 to 60%. According to the latest global data, that massive percentage represents the total amount of all global foreign exchange reserves currently held by central banks in US dollars. I mean, think about that. More than half the world's financial safety net is tied up in a single country's currency. That is absolute, undeniable dominance. But to see how we actually got here, we need to go back to a time when a very different currency wore the crown.
Which brings us to Section 1, the reign of the pound.
So, long before the US dollar stepped onto the global center stage, the financial system was completely dominated by another superpower, the British pound. Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, the United Kingdom was the reigning economic champion, hands down. London was the absolute undisputed center of global finance. But, as we know, that dominance didn't last forever. Two cataclysmic events changed literally everything: World War I and World War II. These conflicts were not just devastating, they were incredibly, staggeringly costly. A powerhouse like Britain had to borrow heavily just to survive, and over those 3 decades of conflict, their once unshakable economy severely weakened. As the British Empire's financial grip started slipping, a new player across the Atlantic was rapidly rising to fill that vacuum: the United States.
And this brilliantly illustrates why the US got to dictate the new financial rules. After World War II, the United States emerged with its industrial capacity totally intact, a booming economy, and, here's the kicker, they held nearly 70% of the entire world's gold reserves. Imagine that for a second. Nearly 3/4 of all the physical wealth in gold sat right there in US vaults. This massive leverage completely set the stage for a monumental shift in how the world handled money. That brings us to Section 2, the Bretton Woods Agreement.
So, that monumental shift officially went down in 1944. With the Second World War finally nearing its end, global leaders gathered in a hotel in New Hampshire to figure out how to rebuild a completely shattered global economy. The US walked into that room with the largest economy, and of course all that gold we just talked about, and that allowed them to effectively rewrite the global financial rulebook. The result? The Bretton Woods system. This did two absolutely crucial things. First, it linked the US dollar directly to physical gold at a fixed price. And second, it linked all other major global currencies not to gold, but directly to the US dollar. In simple terms, this clever arrangement basically made the US dollar as good as gold. Because the US economy was so incredibly strong, the rest of the world trusted this system. And just like that, the dollar was officially placed squarely at the center of the global financial universe.
Now for Section 3, surviving the Nixon shock. For a couple of decades, this system worked smoothly. The world rebuilt, trade flowed, it was great. But then came the year 1971, and with it, a truly terrifying moment for global markets. Facing mounting economic pressures at home and a serious strain on those gold reserves, U.S. President Richard Nixon made a drastic decision. He abruptly ended the direct link between the U.S. dollar and physical gold. This sudden move became known as the Nixon shock. Literally overnight, the anchor of the entire global financial system was seemingly cut loose. When Nixon cut that tie to gold, the dollar became what we call a fiat currency. Let's break that down. Think of a gold-backed dollar kind of like a coat check ticket. You hand in the physical dollar, and you know exactly what physical asset you're guaranteed to get back. A fiat dollar, however, that's more like an IOU from a wealthy, highly reliable friend. Assuming, of course, that friend is the US government and has a massively powerful military to back it up. Its entire value is based purely on trust.
Next up, Section 4, Rise of the Petrodollar.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because you've got to ask, why didn't the whole global financial system just completely collapse in 1971? Why did the dollar remain dominant when it was suddenly just paper? Well, partly because the dollar was already so deeply embedded in global trade networks, but there was another brilliant strategic pivot that happened right around this time, involving the world's most vital resource, oil. Here's how the petrodollar cycle works. Step 1. Every modernizing country on Earth urgently needs oil to run their economies, right? Step 2. The major oil-producing nations agreed to price and trade their oil exclusively in US dollars, which leads to Step 3. If any country anywhere wants to buy oil, they first have to acquire US dollars. This simple three-step cycle effectively created a permanent, constant global demand for the US currency, locking in its dominance even without gold.
Section 5. Why the dollar dominates today.
Fast forward to today. The gold standard is long gone, the global economy has totally transformed with technology, yet the greenback is still king. It dominates international trade, commodity pricing, and global finance. It's even used for massive transactions between two countries when neither of those countries is the United States. So what exactly keeps the dollar so incredibly strong in the modern era? Well, it all boils down to 4 core pillars. First is trust. The U.S. has a long history of economic stability, really strong legal institutions, and deep financial markets. Second is scale. The U.S. economy is simply massive. Third is liquidity. The dollar is incredibly easy to buy, sell, and move around the globe instantly. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the 4th pillar, the network effect. This is such a powerful loop. Because everyone in the world already uses the dollar, it automatically becomes the easiest and safest currency to use, which just continues to reinforce its own dominance year after year.
And finally, Section 6, the future of finance. But we definitely have to ask the big question here. Is the US dollar's dominance a permanent fixture of reality? Not necessarily. As we look at the future of finance, there are looming threats. Some emerging economies and groups of nations are actively trying to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. They're exploring alternative financial messaging systems, they're trading in their own local currencies, and they're rapidly developing new digital currencies and blockchain technologies to bypass traditional dollar-based banking entirely. But displacing a global reserve currency, it's not simple. You can't just invent a new digital coin or print a new paper currency and expect the whole world to adopt it tomorrow. So the crucial point is that overthrowing the dollar requires decades of patiently building immense trust, proving unwavering economic stability through massive crises, and achieving universal global acceptance. It's a monumental task.
Because, as you've seen throughout this explainer, the rise of the US dollar to the absolute top of the global food chain was certainly not an accident. It was the calculated, historical result of 3 massive factors aligning perfectly. Unprecedented economic strength after the World Wars, brilliant strategic positioning through Bretton Woods and the petrodollar system, and deep, deep global trust built and maintained over many decades. Understanding this journey is really the key to understanding how our entire global economy actually works. Because at the end of the day, currencies are not just pieces of paper or numbers on a screen. They are the ultimate expression of international power. The British pound had its era. The US dollar is clearly enjoying its reign right now, which leaves us with one incredibly provocative thought to ponder. If currencies truly are power, who holds the power tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the big questions, and I'll catch you next time.